Screaming when the Roman legions crushed the army of Queen Zenobia outside Antioch in 272 CE, her generals expected execution. Instead, they watched their queen endure something far more calculated. Rome had perfected the art of breaking rulers, without killing them, transforming defiant music monarchs into living monuments to imperial power. For women who wore crowns, defeat meant facing a brutality designed not merely to punish, but to erase music dignity itself. Roman law denied queens legal protection. Under Roman law, war captives existed in a category that stripped them of every protection afforded to citizens. The principle known as ius gentium, or the law of nations, held that military defeat transformed free people into property. Once a city fell or an army surrendered, its inhabitants became legally enslaved, regardless of their former status. A queen commanded no more legal standing than the lowest soldier in her defeated army. This legal framework created a terrifying reality. Roman citizens passed rights that shielded them from certain punishments. To flog a Roman citizen was considered scandalous. To execute one without trial sparked outrage. But foreign captives, regardless of royal blood, held no such protections. They could be mistreated, music displayed, sold, or killed at the discretion of their captives. Roman law made no exceptions for gender, and none for nobility. The 12 Tables, music Rome's earliest legal code from the 5th century BCE, established these principles with brutal clarity. Prisoners taken in war became the property of the Roman state, or were distributed among soldiers. Women of royal lineage music discovered that their former power meant nothing once chains replaced their crowns. Tacitus' music documented this legal reality when he described the treatment of defeated British royalty, noting that Roman officials showed no hesitation in violating those who had once commanded armies and administered music. Justice. Female captives faced additional vulnerability. Roman military culture, forged through centuries of conquest music, regarded captured women as spoils of war. While some elite prisoners might be housed in relative comfort music pending ransom or political negotiation, most faced immediate degradation. The line between prisoner of war and slave existed only on paper. In practice, defeat dissolved all former status, leaving captive queens vulnerable to treatment that would have been unthinkable had they possessed Roman citizenship. Royal prisoners displayed in romantriumphs. The Roman triumph transformed military victory into public spectacle, and captive royalty served as the centerpiece of these elaborate processions. When a general received permission from the Senate to celebrate a triumph, preparations began for a display that would parade Rome's dominance through the streets for all to witness. The route music stretched from the Field of Mars through the Forum and up to the Capitoline Hill, covering nearly 4 kilometers of crowded thoroughfares. These processions followed a carefully choreographed order designed to maximize psychological impact. Musicians and entertainers led the parade, followed by carts bearing paintings and models of conquered cities and distant music lands. Wild animals from exotic territories were led in chains, offering Romans a glimpse of the unknown world there. Legions had subdued. Then came the prisoners of war, walking in shackles at the heart of the spectacle. Captured rulers marched at the front of the prisoner column, music their royal garments often left intact to emphasize the magnitude of music their fall. Queens who had commanded armies now shuffled in chains before crowds that jeered and celebrated their humiliation. The contrast was deliberate by displaying monarchs in their full regalia, while bound and powerless. Rome communicated a message that resonated far beyond the city walls. No kingdom stood beyond reach. No throne guaranteed safety. The triumphal procession served multiple purposes beyond celebration. It demonstrated Roman military might to potential allies and enemies alike. It satisfied the bloodlust of citizens who craved visible proof of victory. And it provided a stage for the systematic degradation of those who had dared resist Roman expansion. For female captives of royal blood, the triumph meant enduring the gaze of thousands while stripped of all dignity. The journey typically took an entire day, with the procession moving slowly to allow spectators along the route to observe every detail. Captive queens walked this gauntlet knowing Their fate hung in the balance. Some would survive the day, others would not see sunset. The uncertainty itself, music served as torture, forcing the defeated to contemplate their approaching doom with every step through streets lined with celebrating Romans. Zenobia marched through Rome in gold chains. Queen Zenobia of Palmyra had carved out an empire that stretched from Egypt to Anatolia, challenging Roman authority across the east. When Emperor Aurelian finally crushed her forces in 272 CE and captured the queen as she fled toward Persia, he gained more than a military victory. He acquired the perfect symbol for his upcoming triumph. The Historia, a collection of imperial biographies written in the 4th century, provides detailed descriptions of Zenobia's appearance music in Aurelian's triumphal procession of 274 CE. The account, likely drawing on music eyewitness testimony, describes a spectacle designed to overwhelm observers with its opulence and cruelty. Music greater than music, music, music. Music greater than heat. Heat. Music, heat. Music, 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 heat. Music. Music greater than music. Music greater than heat. Greater than music. Greater than ifying Roman demands. The strategy failed catastrophically. Roman officials led by the imperial procurator Danos Catuz ignored the will entirely. They seized Alini lands and property, declaring the entire kingdom forfeit. When Queen Boudica protested this violation, she faced punishment that demonstrated how little protection royal status afforded. Defeated rulers. Tacitus, whose father-in-law Agricola served in Britain during this period, recorded what followed, with unusual directness for ancient historians' music discussing such matters. Boudica was publicly subjected to corporal punishment. The flogging alone represented a profound violation. To beat a Roman citizen required legal justification and procedural safeguards. To flog a queen of an allied kingdom constituted an act of deliberate humiliation. But the Romans went further. Boudica's daughters, like all teenagers, and certainly unmarried, were violated by Roman soldiers. Tacitus describes these assaults with sparse language music that conveys his own horror at events that violated even Roman sensibilities about acceptable conduct. The historian notes that Boudica was flogged and her daughters violated, placing these crimes at the center of his explanation. For the rebellion that followed, the abuse was not random violence, but calculated music degradation designed to break the royal family and demonstrate Roman dominance over the Essene. The public nature of these crimes multiplied their impact. This was not violence committed in secret, but humiliation performed before the Essene people. By abusing the royal family in front of their subjects, Roman officials sent a message about the fate awaiting those who questioned imperial authority. The physical abuse and violation music, Boudica and her daughters were meant to terrorize an entire population into submission. The strategy backfired spectacularly. Rather than crushing resistance, Phoebus of the royal family ignited a rebellion that nearly drove Rome from Britain. Boudica raised an army that destroyed 3 Roman cities, including Londinium, massacring tens of thousands of Roman citizens and their allies. Tacitus preserves a speech he attributes to Boudica music in which she declares that she fights, not as a queen seeking to preserve her kingdom, but as a woman avenging her abused body music and the violated honor of her daughters. The rebellion ended in defeat at an unknown battlefield where Roman discipline and tactical music positioning overcame the far larger British forces. Octatus claims Boudica poisoned music herself rather than face capture. The fate of her daughters goes unrecorded. They vanish from historical accounts after the initial violation, their stories lost to silence. Execution after triumphs ended, as triumphal processions wound through Rome toward the Capitoline Hill. Captive rulers knew their journey might end at the Mamertine prison, known in Latin as the Tulinum, this ancient structure built into the northeastern slope of the capital. Line served as the final stop for Rome's most notable enemies. While the triumph continued to the Temple of Jupiter, where the victorious general would make offerings, music-condemned prisoners were led aside to face execution. The Tullianum consisted of 2 levels. The upper chamber served as a holding cell, but the lower dungeon, music accessible only through a hole in the ceiling, became the execution chamber. Here, in darkness and filth, music Rome's enemies met their end. The method varied. Some were executed by suffocation, others were left to starve. The process remained deliberately hidden from public view, occurring while crowds celebrated on the streets above. Versing the Gic chieftain music, who had unified the tribes of Gaul against Julius Caesar, exemplified this fate. After his defeat music at Alesia in 52 BC-E, Caesar held him in prison for 6 years before finally parading him through Rome in the triumph of 46 BCE. The GIC leader, once vigorous and commanding, had deteriorated music during his captivity, until he appeared as a broken figure before the Roman crowds. After the procession, he was led to the Tullianum and executed. Jugurtha, king of Numidia, met a similarly brutal end following Marius's triumph music in 104 BCE, according to ancient accounts. Music, when he was lowered into the Tullianum's lower chamber, the king went mad with terror. He was left to starve to death over 6 days, his cries echoing through stone walls, while Rome celebrated above. The historian Plutarch recorded his final words, reportedly asking in delirium how cold this Roman bath is. Simon Barora, a leader of the Jewish revolt that ended with the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 CE, was displayed in Titus's triumph before being executed at the traditional site in the Forum. Josephus documented how the triumphal procession paused at the temple of Jupiter while messengers awaited word that the execution had been carried out. Only after confirmation of the Anema leader's death did the ceremonies conclude. Not every captive ruler faced immediate execution. The decision rested with the triumphant general music and increasingly under the empire with the emperor himself. Some prisoners proved more valuable alive, serving as permanent symbols of Roman victory, or as bargaining tools in future negotiations. But for those marked for death, the triumph offered only a temporary reprieve before the descent into the Tullianum's darkness. The treatment of captured music Queensby Roman soldiers reveals how power operated in the ancient world. Legal systems that protected citizens evaporated at the boundary of conquest. Dignity afforded to nobility dissolved in defeat. These documented cases from Tacitus, Cassius Dio, and other ancient historians force us to confront the deliberate cruelty embedded in Roman conquest. The flogging of Boudica, the golden chains on Zenobia, the executions following triumph's music, were not aberrations, but calculated policies designed to break music resistance and display power. Take a moment to consider how the systematic humiliation music defeated royalty shaped the fears that kept Rome's enemies compliant for centuries. The stone walls of the Mamertine prison still stand in Rome, a reminder that the triumphs, celebrated in ancient texts, were built on human suffering. Queens who commanded armies and administered justice found themselves reduced to spectacles. Their degradation transformed into entertainment for crowds who never considered the cost of empire, written in broken lives and stolen dignity.